Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are still in studio in Sydney at the Grey Space office. Jordan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just talking off air about should we change our intro?
That's $1 million question.
Should we? Do we do a poll or do we just like put like a little question box and people can...
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We were playing around with different sounds, like a little clapping, a little like show. Yeah, go for it.
like very Hollywood vibe.
Yeah.
Or we could even go...
Like game show.
Yeah, I think they're a bit tragic, but we'll do something
We
good.
could do something. If you want it, let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, we're happy. We're for the people, by the people, by the people, for the people, however that saying goes.
We're open to a new intro.
We are.
Though, that's what we're saying.
If Master Owen
you want.
gives us a go-ahead.
If it passes as branding.
Yeah. So has to give the go-ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Well, today we're kind of taking a bit of a different path. Instead of focusing on strategy and techniques, we're diving into the world of mindsets for business owners.
Yep, we are.
We are. We're going to be talking about how different mindsets can significantly impact your business success, and discussing things like fear-based mindsets, which we've kind of touched on in the past, growth mindsets, abundance mindsets, the difference between like objective and subjective decision-making. So, George, when I say the word mindset, where does your mind go? What do you start thinking about?
For me, mindset is something that is always changing, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It always comes in waves. That's just me. I guess everyone's different with mindset. Is there a type of mindset that I like to live my life by? Stoic mindset.
Stoicism.
Ryan
Holiday.
Robert Greene as well. He talks about that stuff. So Ryan Holiday did his writing apprenticeship under Robert Greene. And Robert Greene he's written a few books, like Laws About Power, Human Nature. It's like anthropology type stuff. War, like strategies of war. And there was another one he wrote about seduction and like the different ways that people use that. And anyway, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But yeah, I think the whole stoicism mindset, I think it's super interesting because it's like sort of addressing all the bad things, but getting on with the show, as I spoke about last time in the last episode. So that's probably my favorite type of mindset.
Great. Yeah. Well,
in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I think an abundance mindset or a growth mindset, they're different.
Yep.
Are probably the two that I like to live by.
Yep.
And make decisions by in terms of work and general life.
Yep.
And we'll dive into that a little bit more. But I think like the idea for this conversation sparked from another conversation that I was having with a friend recently about their own career. And it just started like getting me on a train of thinking of like how slippery the slope can be when you are framing things from a negative perspective or a negative mindset, and how one small thing that happened, maybe you've misinterpreted it, whatever it might be, you've kind of shaped it in this really negative place. And then for the rest of the day or the rest of the week or the rest of the month, the way that you're approaching that person or that similar scenario or that client or whatever it might be, but the way that you're kind of approaching it, everything is then masked with this negative approach or this negative mindset. And so you're kind of closing yourself off to opportunities to learn, to develop, to understand people better. I think I'm a pretty big believer in like energy and how it impacts the way that you show up, the work that you do, how you contribute to the greater good, how you contribute to your work, how you contribute to your team, and like the overall results or the rewards that do or don't come to you or come up as a result of the approach or the mindset that you take on.
Yeah, I agree. No one likes a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
You want to be around good people. You don't want to be working with people where something's always an issue, there's always a problem. You don't need that stuff. You don't want to be surrounded by that. You want good, positive mindset, none of the bad stuff.
So stoicism is interesting. When did you first start reading about it?
Since I like when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Like
how did you come across it?
The old guys. I was brainwashed at home. My old man reads about it a lot. So like all of the originals like Pluto, Homer, all of that type of stuff. The first generation, if you'd call it that, on like philosophy. Yeah. And I just think that like Marcus Aurelius's book, Meditations, is probably the best one. It's just about about life in general and how you could go back thousands of years, and it's just like the same teachings still play a part today in how you think and how us as people think. I think my favorite book is probably that one on Stoicism and on mindset. So my favorite thing about Stoicism is it's essentially a way of thinking where you accept what's happened and you focus on what you can control using your reasoning. And that's something that I like to live my life by. It's like, cool, this is what's happening. How can we deal with it? That's it. It's not like, oh yeah, but what if this person says that? So-and-so says that. What if this happens? No, out of our control. Out of our control. And look, don't get me wrong. There's times where that stuff obviously happens, but that's probably my favorite type of mindset.
That's awesome.
And the old philosophers always talk about it. And that's where like Ryan Holiday, Robert Greene, the books that they've written, it's all based off the old boys 2,000 years ago, probably more. But yeah, Marcus Aurelius' book is probably the best one. Marcus Aurelius Meditations. It's a Penguin book, so you can get it for $10.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, we can put the link in the show notes as well.
Yeah. What about you? I know.
Yeah,
how did you get into your favorite mindset?
It's a good question. I think it was an element of like just trial and error, of like trialing different things, approaching things in different ways. I think probably when I stepped into a particular role, which was like a training and development sort of manager, part of my job was to recognize what people wanted in their career, but then also how to understand and recognize based in their career journey, how far along that path they were, whether they were ready for that next step or whether there was components that they needed to address. And a lot of it came down to mindset. It could be that you could be the most skilled technician in the world, but if you didn't have the right mindset or the right approach, then you weren't going to be a great leader because you need to approach things in a certain way. So part of my job was to be able to recognize that in people. So I had to do a lot of research and self-learning and self-development into all of these different mindsets that exist and different ways and techniques to kind of really lean into it. I think also I had a mentor, her name was Bonnie, and she just kind of had this abundance mindset was what it was, but the way that she kind of approached business with that mindset was just really eye-opening for me. It wasn't from like a limiting perspective or a fixed mindset. It wasn't like there's only a certain amount out there and I have to get as much of it as possible. It was like, there's a lot of stuff out there. Nothing's limited. And depending on kind of our skill sets, our value proposition, depending on what we're looking for, we're going to, like a law of attraction, we're going to bring in the right work or the right clients or the right people into the organization based on how we show up and what we're kind of putting out into the universe. I think abundance mindset is probably the one thing that I have, in that I think that there is enough and plenty for everyone to go around, whether it's resources, opportunities. I think rather than it being limited and there's only a certain amount of businesses out there that you can work with or whatever it might be in your industry, I think that approaching it that way means that you're probably open to more opportunities, or in my experience anyway, like when you are living and operating, or when I have been living and operating in this headspace, I feel like I end up seeing opportunities that I probably wouldn't be open to otherwise, because I'm recognizing situations in a different way, or I'm solving problems in a different way. I'm reframing a loss or a situation so I can move past the negatives quite quickly, and I can say, okay, well, this, I guess like you said, like the objective reality is that this happened. I can't change that this happened. So I could either sit here and wallow in that, or I could take that out on the team, or I could use that to scramble and be like, I need to do everything I can for all of these clients that I have, and come at it from, I guess, like a fear-based perspective or a fear-based approach. But instead it's like, okay, I know that this is what it is. This thing's happened. I can't change that, like you said. But by quickly being able to reframe that thing, that loss, I guess, it allows me to recognize, okay, well, this has happened. Maybe it's made space for something else. Maybe this client we don't work with anymore because it's made space for a bigger client or a better client or a more aligned client. And I really do notice the difference in those two mindsets, and when I do kind of come at a situation with that fear-based mindset, and I find myself kind of like primarily making decisions out of a place of like stress or anxiety or fear. And I very rarely make a good decision, to be perfectly honest. It's probably like a rash decision or it's a Band-Aid solution, just like, let's just fix it and let's just move on. Let's just, rather than zoom out,
step
put
back,
the brakes on, take a step back, take a breath. What's the right step? What's the thing that we should be doing now? So I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent there, or I kind of waffled a little bit, but
do you think it's important to be able to identify different people's mindset in business?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we're going to talk about like some good mindsets and growth and abundance, objective and subjective decision making. But I think you need to be able to you need to be able to identify someone that's trying to be cunning and manipulative and all of that type of stuff too. So I think it is important to not pull the wool over your eyes, but just to make sure that you need to understand that not everyone thinks like you too.
Yeah.
There's a super interesting. He was a politician in like the 1500s, Niccolo Machiavelli. I don't know if you've heard of that. He wrote a book called The Prince, and he was like an advisor to the Medici family in Florence during like the Renaissance period. And he wrote a book about like they say it's such a bad book, but it's like being cunning, manipulative and in the political space. And it's super interesting because like you would read that book and then you look at the political sphere and it's like, this guy was talking about that like 500 years ago. Yeah. And I think if you can identify the wolf in sheep's skin, that would help a lot in business if you're negotiating or whatever the case may be. If you see someone's trying to play you, because it's all good to talk about growth and abundance and it's all fantastic stuff, but there are people out there that couldn't give to whatever about you and your business, and you want to be able to see them coming, bit on the darker side of psychology, but unfortunately you do come across people like that.
No, absolutely. I think it's important. I think, like you said, being able to recognize it either as clients you might be potentially working with and then going like, okay, well do we align? Are our values aligned? I know objectively I can help you achieve a means. Yes. I can provide a particular service, but zooming out a little bit, are we aligned in the sense of like, is this going to be a positive partnership for both parties? And I think that sometimes when we come at potentially those conversations with that fear-based mindset, you might just be like, oh, who cares? I just have to get them in here. Yep. I just have to get them on board as a client. Yeah.
Especially at the start. You find at the start it's like, oh, blinkers are on, need the clients. But if they're not the right fit.
Which it's kind of hard because at the start you do need the clients.
It is. And it's only, and at the start you take them all. But now, like looking back, there was a couple where it's like, probably shouldn't have. Maybe we don't align. But you live and you learn.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well, some of the other maybe like, I don't want to say negative mindsets, but maybe more of, I guess they're less, I don't know what the appropriate word is, but I guess it is like a type of negative mindset. It's like an all or nothing, like a dichotomous type thinking where it's like black or white, there's no middle ground, there's only opportunity for perfection, and if it's not perfect, it's failing. Obviously we're talking about, there's a lot of different mindsets we can talk about today, but I think that's another part that can be really damaging in business, because you kind of end up in a vein of like, well, it's either this or this.
Yes.
But it's like, wow, the reality of running a business is like, well, there's this whole grey space.
Free plug.
There's this whole grey space in the middle that you could be operating, and that's your middle ground.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of this and it's a little bit of that, and it's not perfect, but it by all means is not a failure. And so I think that there's just a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress out there, and I think it quite often can like lead down a particular path. I think catastrophizing is probably another thing, and something that I really struggle with, as in like struggle to connect with somebody that is a catastrophizer, someone that thinks the absolute worst is always going to happen, or they're consistently discounting positives, or
so narcissist.
Yeah, a little bit, or like someone that's like constantly focusing solely on the negative aspects. And I guess it kind of aligns to like maybe why I'm so interested in abundance and growth mindsets is like when you're solely focused on negative mindsets of a situation and you're ignoring the positives, you kind of end up down this spiral of catastrophizing everything about a particular scenario or a particular workplace or a particular situation that's happened. And it's really hard, like you said, to take off those glasses or to take the blinders off and just be like, whoa, hold on a sec. I need to like look at the bigger picture here.
Yep.
I'm really getting caught in one particular thing.
I think it's such an interesting thing, the way people act in all different scenarios, not just in business, but just life in general. And there's so many like schools of thinking and teachings. It's super interesting because everyone's different as a person, business, whatever it is. And it's really important to, what in my opinion is to have some type of baseline understanding of these things so you can see them coming in your personal life and in the business realm too.
And I think through education, practice, like you're not stuck in a mindset.
Yes, correct.
I think that's the other thing is like part of a growth mindset is like understanding you're not stuck in a particular position. Things are always changing. You're always learning. You're not born with a set of skills that doesn't change and that's all you've got. It's like knowing that you can grow and knowing that you can kind of learn more and you can change the mindsets.
Sure. I saw a video. It was Robert De Niro, Tom Hanks. I think it was Jamie Foxx, and Robert De Niro. He's like, they ask, what is one thing that you wish you knew earlier? And it's like, this time shall pass. I know I said that in an American accent. This time shall pass.
Yeah, that's all right.
But he said that, and it's like all for the good things. It's like, you don't want to be on that high for too long because it's going to pass. And it's the same thing with the bad things as well. It's like, cool, this is what's happening. This is why I'm feeling like this, but this will pass. Yeah. So I think that's super important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this time or this too shall pass, whatever it is.
Yeah, one of those.
One of those. I agree.
Potato.
Yeah.
Tomato.
Tomato. Yeah. That's exactly it. Something bad's going to happen.
You can't put it off. It's inevitable.
But also it's going to end.
Yeah, it's correct.
At some point.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught in the hole for too
long.
So
maybe we can dive into, obviously like we said, there's like so much kind of, there's so many out there. There's so many schools of thought. But I guess the first and maybe the most common one that people have heard of is like a fear-based mindset.
Yeah.
And so maybe we could dive into that a little bit and like what that actually means and how it can drive certain decision-making.
Yeah. So essentially fear-based mindset, it's characterized by decision-making and the behaviors driven primarily by fear, anxiety, anticipation, negative outcomes. So all of the ones that make you feel terrible, to be honest. And like some common things are fear of job loss.
Yep. And so staying in a job, like, or staying in a toxic working environment because you're afraid of, taking a risk and taking that risk to go to a new job. So it's like, I'm just going to stay here because potentially it's better than the alternative. And it's like, no, it's probably not, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of better alternatives out there.
Yeah.
But I think if you're thinking about your career from a fear-based perspective, it's like, what else am I going to do? Who else is going to find me valuable? It's just better off staying here. When the reality is that, that you're probably going to learn a lot more if you shifted somewhere else.
And some people get stuck in that forever.
Yeah.
And they can never make that jump.
And I think it's like, it kind of goes into fear of risk, I think is a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's very fair too.
Totally.
Like that's circumstantial. If you have a family, you have a mortgage, rent.
Totally.
It's tough.
Totally tough. But I think it's like if you can take risks, and whether they're calculated, measured, smaller risks, incremental risks, it can quite often lead to innovation within your business and particular periods of growth as well. Yep. But like you said, you have to be in a position where maybe you're taking very small risks rather than taking a huge risk.
Yep.
My husband and I both started businesses last year and we did it at the same time.
Nice.
Was that a good idea? But I guess like we were able to take that risk because at that point in time, it was just us. Yes, we had a mortgage. We didn't have kids at the time. So we were able to kind of make that jump.
Yep.
But yeah, had we been a little bit further along, had we had a mortgage for a bit longer, had we had dependables, would we have done it? Maybe not.
Geez, now that you said it, I haven't actually thought about it. You both did do that at the same time.
Yeah.
Good
stress.
Stuff. But you're both killing it, so it's a good choice.
Much stress. Worth it. But yeah, it's you're so right.
How do you find that? Like from a relationship standpoint, if you're comfortable?
Yeah. I mean, as in like taking that risk initially and
together.
Like,
doing separate things, but like taking that risk at the same time.
For us, it's been awesome. We've always kind of been very open with one another in terms of like what's going on and why we're doing it, and helping one another make decisions, whether for work. And so we are probably as invested in one another's business as we are in our own. So if I ever have to talk to him about something with my work, he's like across our services, our clients, he knows who I'm talking about. And on the flip side, if he's talking about a particular area of his business, it's the same kind of thing. So I think we kind of said to ourselves that if we are going to do it, we need to be as supportive of one another. We need to kind of be the rock that the other one needs, because like you said, there's so many times in business where it's stressful, you haven't got the cash flow coming in, you don't have clients, whatever it might be, you need kind of someone to be, I guess, stoic on the other side that can be like, emotional thought, get rid of it, let it go. And he's really good at doing that to me, and I'm really good at doing that to him, because quite often we can kind of spiral into our place and be like, of course, what am I going to do?
And that's it's so normal.
And I think there's an element of like, because obviously we've been together for like 15 years, so we know one another really well, so we can also recognize when the person starts to spiral. So it's like we've both obviously got telltale signs, so I can be like, there's something going on over here. I think we need to talk about it. And he might just be like, I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I don't know what's going on with work. And I can kind of like prod and get to the same point. So yes, it was absolutely stressful at the same time, because, we both went from working for other people. But we also kind of were like, well, I was listening to this podcast. I think this is maybe what drove us to do it. Is like I was listening to a podcast.
Who was it?
Denzel Washington.
Oh, Denzel, the man.
He was saying, if you're going to fall forward. Don't fall backwards. So don't have a plan B. And I just think this is what I've kind of like taken in business over the last kind of 12 months. It's like, if you're going to fall and you're going to make a mistake, just fall. Because the reality is we're lucky in the sense of like, we're going to be able to figure something out. We're going to be up. If it doesn't work, we'll get a job working for somebody else.
Exactly.
But I think that was just something that we were like, well, if we're going to fall forward, don't be like, oh, I'm going to give it a go. But also if I need to, I can go back to teaching, or I can go back to, whatever admin or whatever it is you might be working.
Exactly.
So I think that was what made it possible.
Yeah, good stuff. Denzel made it possible.
Denzel. But not saying it didn't come without stress.
Of course.
Absolutely. So
good stuff.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
I guess some other examples of like, that's obviously kind of like work, but leadership potentially. I mean, I know like you've got quite a big team now. You guys are growing really quickly. What would you say is like an example of, if you did have that fear-based kind of mindset and you were making decisions from that perspective, what could be something that you might face in a leadership role?
I actually try and, when I'm making those decisions, especially now that we do have a few team members, never to make them when you're charged up on emotion. So I'll always leave it for an hour or two, because it's not going to make a difference if you make a call, a knee-jerk reaction, as opposed to waiting, so you can try and let all the emotions subside, so that way you can think logically. Whereas previously it would be like, you say something, not yell, but like, you're ticked off. Whereas now I wouldn't do that. I would just, cool, that's happened. Let the emotion subside and think logically, because you can't have an emotionally charged person with an emotionally charged conversation with someone who is going to be emotionally charged. Like if you're questioning something that someone's doing or whatever, if they put the barriers up and they're on the defensive, well, then it's purely an emotional conversation. Whereas if you can take it, if one side can take the emotion out of it, I think, in my opinion, it's a much, much better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a leader or a manager, it's your responsibility to be able to do that. Yeah,
I agree. You have to. You can't just go around acting on emotion. Because you're not going to, I don't think that fosters a good culture.
Yeah, I agree. I guess you can kind of see like, if you did in that scenario, like you made that emotionally, or you had that conversation emotionally charged, and the employee on the other side of the table was emotionally charged, what the potential kind of snowball
exactly right.
of that could look like.
Not pretty.
Yeah. How can you shift out of that mindset? Like you just said, like quite often you kind of like take a break and you step back and you address it later. How do you do that? What is that approach that you take?
Breathing, like a breathing exercise.
Yeah. Okay.
Like in for 3 seconds, hold, and then out for 3 seconds. that one works quite well. And
Yep.
even just going for a walk, getting out
Yep.
of the environment, the work environment, and doing it that way. And especially if you feel that you've seen something and your heart rate's up and you can feel a bit of the anxiety coming on, or just, you know, you feel the anxiety coming on. It's like, okay, I need to bring it down, get level-headed, calm, and then make a decision.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. Going for a walk is the best thing.
Yeah.
Just to switch off, let your mind wander outside of work. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think it really is. I think I've made foolish decisions in the past of coming at conversations emotionally charged, and you know, I have messed them up royally.
We all have.
Absolutely. Like anyone that's kind of stepped into leadership has probably done that. It probably hasn't been smooth. And so I think that having done that a few times and then been like, whoa, that didn't work out. Why didn't that work out? Oh yeah, wait a second, because, you know, I came at this the wrong way. So yeah, I think it's the same thing. I just, whatever happens, take a deep breath. I talk to someone, usually out external from the scenario, and I don't address it immediately.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it might be an hour later, it might be the next morning, depending on kind of what the scale of it was, whether it's a mistake, whether it's a client leaving, whatever it looks like, whether it's a team-based issue, like a HR concern that you need to address. Yeah, it's just taking a breath. And coming about it with a fresh perspective.
Couldn't agree more.
What is the most common, I guess, kind of shifting out of that and into probably more of those positive mindsets? What is one of the most common mindsets that you see business owners or entrepreneurs have?
That growth mindset. I think if you don't have that growth mindset as a business owner, good luck. You need to be able to just hard work, dedication. And I think, I think it's the most important one. Because it's just, you know, input hours, get the work done, and you'll learn everything else through time. Whether it's AI, whether it's accounting, marketing, if you put 10 hours in to try and learn a subject, you're going to learn something. That's my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think growth mindset for sure. I think, and I maybe to like define it is...
Yeah, you'll define it better than me. Hard work. That's it.
I think it's like, it's the belief that your basic abilities, skill set, intelligence can be developed. It can be grown. You're not kind of stuck in, okay, you started in a particular role. Maybe you worked in admin. Maybe you started as an account manager, whatever it might be. Understanding that you can grow, you can develop a new skill set, you can develop a new like level of intelligence. You can continue to grow and scale and take on new things. You know, 5 years ago, would I have said, hey, Zara, you're going to be able to read like a cash flow statement and like do budgeting and forecasting? Absolutely not.
Or do a podcast.
Or do a podcast.
With all the lights on you.
Not a chance. Not a chance. So I think it's just like, that growth mindset is probably the one core thing of being like, things are going to be hard. Like you said, things are going to be challenging. There's going to be things that you've never done before. I think that's the other thing is like, if you're going to start a business, most of what you do, once you shift out of the techspert role or the technical role, most of what you do, you've probably never done before. But you got to do it and you have to figure it out.
It's so true.
So I think that is it for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, that growth mindset, when you reflect, and I think when I go back like 2 years now, and it's like, email Owen on a plane to Melbourne recording a podcast. Like what? And here we are now. I mean, you can just go off the cuff for an hour.
Yeah, truly.
Whereas back then it's like, I need to prepare for 10 hours for this 30-minute episode. And look, obviously we still prepare, but it's a lot easier now as opposed to the start. Even the first episode, I listened to the first one where Owen goes, all right, guys, so now you're going to interview me. And you listen to it and train wreck. Train wreck. So I'm not going to say which episode it was because it's a hard listen. But yeah, it's just about having that growth mindset where things are going to be tricky at the start and you may suck, but you put in the hours and the hard work and you'll definitely get better and get smarter and it'll all pay off. Yeah.
What are some tips that you have? Because obviously you've just explained it really well. What are some tips that you would say to be able to pass on?
Yeah. You have to have a learning mindset and be I think that's the most important thing. You need to have an open mindset and you need to be okay with being wrong. I think the quicker you can be comfortable with that, the more you're going to grow as a person. And I also think the quicker you can make decisions, whether they're right or wrong, you'll see your business grow more as well, because you don't want to take months and months to make a call, because there's opportunity cost there. Yep. There's times where you see it and it's just, dude, you need to make a call. But you need to be okay to be wrong, because you're not always going to be right. We've made heaps of calls and we're wrong from a business standpoint. And you need to be comfortable with that. I think learning, and as a business owner, you need to invest time into learning new things about your market, whether it's the industry you're in, if it's marketing, if it's accounting. I think given how easy it is now to access information through books, YouTube, podcasts, you really have no excuse to bury your head in the sand. And you just need to be accountable, because at the end of the day, it's just yourself. If you're a solopreneur, it's just you. It's just that person in the mirror. So I think it's important that you take that in your stride, and that way you know that it's on you to succeed in business.
Yeah, and I get it's always evolving, right? And if things stayed the same as they have stayed for, since you started your business, and it was still the same, probably a pretty damn boring journey. So it's like that learning component, that changing component, you're developing, you're learning. You probably can connect with people that you wouldn't have been able to connect with in the past. You can have conversations you wouldn't have been able to have in the past. And I think it's also like it opens your perspective and your way of like problem solving. And I think, you're exactly right in that being able to make a decision, be okay with the potential failure of that decision. That's also, you're probably going to learn so much more from that, potentially 6-week turnaround, rather than sitting on a decision for 6 months, researching, and then missing the opportunity.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's, focusing on, I think the other thing I would say is like focusing on possibilities rather than focusing on the limitations, because there's limitations to literally everything and anything. And obviously if the cons or limitations severely outweigh the possibilities, then, kind of do a cost scenario.
Sure.
But I think if you see a potential opportunity or a potential possibility and you can see that there's a reason behind it, give it a go. Yeah. If you can afford to, give it a go.
Yeah. And when we say that, it's not about being reckless and just jumping in to the deep end. Like you need to, think it out and make sure that it's all good. Not saying to just jump in carelessly.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where those other people, whether networking, roundtabling, having a mentor, can be really valuable, because sometimes you can kind of sit in your own little echo chamber of my thoughts, my team, my business partner, my whatever. We're all coming at it from one perspective or one approach. And so if you can kind of like just open the door a little bit and kind of cross the road and go and talk to someone in that house, or you can go and talk to someone in that business, and you can talk to someone in a different industry and be like, hey, this is my situation. They might be able to be like, have you thought about this?
Yeah. And even if you don't have a network, like podcasts, you can listen to someone speak for 2 hours about their mindset and how they would tackle a problem, and reading books. It's so important. Yeah. It's so important. And like I put a lot of the growth of Grace-Based down to that, about from reading and from listening to podcasts. Like for me, it's one of the most important things is learning every week. And you need to be able to do that. And if you don't have a network, like we're fortunate we do, we can always speak to each other and Dan and Owen and everyone else that we know in business. But if you don't, use all the information available to you through podcasts and books. Yeah. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing is like part of what we've spoken about is like some objective decision making, but then there's also subjective decision making involved in that as well. And like objective is like rational. Yep. Subjective is bringing in kind of some emotional components. What would be an example of like a reason to make an objective decision? Or what would be like, when would it be more important to make an objective decision versus a subjective decision?
Objective. Do you think hiring? Or do you think because there's a cultural standpoint, when I say culture as in like your company culture. Yeah, yeah. I don't know, do you want to be more subjective when you're making that decision?
I think that's a good point. I think, I do. Because I think if you're only being objective,
you can't always just think like a rock.
Yeah, no, totally. I was like, as I was asking the question, I was like, what is an example?
Yeah.
But I think if you're only being objective in hiring, then you're only looking at like skill set, CV, how well they present.
CV, where they've worked.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what are they like as a person? And like at the start, I was like, CV, it's important, experience. Whereas now, like I've learned a lot from you where it's like the importance of culture in a business and the importance of wanting to get people to come to work.
Yeah, wanting to get people to come to work, building that loyalty, the belief in your vision and your business is really important. Obviously, they need to be able to support that.
Of course. There still needs to be that technical skill set.
You still have to be able to do the job.
Hey, good guy. Can't do the job.
Yeah.
Hired.
So I think it's like that's probably an example of like where that balance is really important of like being able to take both into a situation.
Yeah, I agree.
And be like, okay, what would be an example of like a purely objective decision where you would be like, nah, emotions out of it. I need to focus on the data I only or whatever.
Maybe purchasing a business or rolling out a new service line, cutting a service line. I think when you need to fire someone, I think you need to be objective because when you start to become subjective, it's like, oh yeah, he's a good person. She's fantastic. Yeah. Whereas if the writing's on the wall, you want to be able to push that emotion to the side and just be objective.
Yep.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree.
Sick.
I think they're good examples. I totally agree. So what are some tips, I guess, obviously like developing kind of critical thinking skills is key.
Yep.
And what we mean by that is, or what I mean by that is being able to say, okay, well, when do I need to take this hat off and put this hat on? When do I need to be able to assess it in this situation? Which I don't know, for me, in my opinion, just kind of comes through experience, trial and error, talking to other people, being able to say like, this situation's come up, and then they can kind of be like, hey, whoa. You're getting carried away over here. You need to come over on this side. Yeah. What else?
I think understanding people's personality types as well.
Oh, yeah.
To dive a bit deeper. I think that's really important because that'll help how you communicate. Sorry, it'll help you communicate with different personality types. Critical thinking is probably the most important one. We're really talking about peeling out emotion as opposed to objective decision making. I think you have to be able to think critically, step back, and know what call you need to make in that given moment. As we grew or as we're growing, I think psychology has become a very important thing in growing a team.
Yep.
So I believe that it's really important that you do have some type of understanding of different traits and different people, because you need to control how you communicate with people and how they're going to react to whether it's feedback. You know, maybe you can't talk to some person in a certain way, whereas someone else you can because of their personality type. I think it's really important to be able to do that when your team grows, because everyone's different and you can't just say, I'm just going to deal with this situation like this because that's how I dealt with it last time. Well, no, because if they're completely different people, which they are because everyone's different, maybe they're not going to react well to it. So I think it's important to be able to identify different personality types and how to communicate with people.
Absolutely. I have an example of that is one of the companies I worked at in the past, we did a DISC profile assessment.
Is that the coloured one?
Yes. Yeah. And it assesses you, so it's like a 45-minute survey, and by the end of it, you essentially get like a ranking in these 4 different key areas of how you show up to work.
Yes.
So D is dominance, so dominance in the workplace, dominance in relationships, those kinds of things. I is interpersonal. S is steadiness in work. And C is conscientiousness.
Yep.
And so what it does is essentially evaluates where you sit on this scale of 100, gives you like a ranking, maybe 80 in dominance, and it also gives you your natural, so what you are naturally, and then how you adapt based on particular scenarios. So you would have like your natural kind of way that you show up could be, 80 out of 100 is dominance, but the way that you adapt yourself when you show up to work or when you show up to meetings might be a 70. So it's like you're pulling back on your dominance so that you can allow other people to increase theirs.
Yep.
Essentially giving people other people space to talk and air their ideas. Interpersonal is like obviously how you build relationships, how you kind of connect with other people. Steadiness is your consistency and reliability on the work that you do. And then conscientiousness is like essentially following through particular, an example would be do you follow particular processes?
Yep.
And do you follow those processes consistently?
Yep.
That was, for me, my lowest. It was like 11 out of 100.
Nice.
I think my adapted was 12 out of 100.
Yeah, okay.
So struggle to follow a process. So it's just interesting that like there was 3 of us in this, there was in the entire leadership team, I think there was 9 of us, and all very different, all in different roles. Obviously there was like head of operations, a head of people and development, head of strategy. And so everyone kind of came at things, a head of sales, everyone kind of came at things differently. And the reason we did it was because we were kind of doing an entire company restructure and we needed different people to take on different responsibilities. And it was interesting, the 3 people that the 2 people that I probably worked most closely with were probably the 2 people that I almost shared an identical disc profile with. Head of operations was extremely high in conscientiousness and steadiness, quite low in interactions and like sociability, and quite low in dominance, which was perfect for the role that they were in because they needed to be able to follow a process.
Yep.
They needed to be able to build a process for the entire organization to follow. So it was interesting having these different profiles and kind of having almost like an insight into someone's brain and the way that they work. So then when you're having a conversation with them and you're trying to come to a solution, they're coming at it from this perspective. And obviously if I'm really low in conscientiousness and someone's really high in it, I'm just like, who cares? Fast and loose. Let's just go for it. Let's just give it a go. And then someone on the other side of the table was like, whoa. Let's kind of plan. Let's map. Let's process it out. We have a step-by-step procedure and this is why we have it. You can obviously see how those two personality types could be like, well, we're struggling to work together.
Yeah.
I just want to move fast. I just want to get things done.
Yep.
And they're like, well, but we have a process to follow. But it's really important because then I can go into that meeting and go, okay, this is how this person thinks. I need to adapt. But then they can come into that meeting and be like, okay, well, this is how Zara thinks. She's a bit fast and loose. I need to explain why things are important and why processes are important. But then I can go into it being like, okay, I need to be more open to the process.
Yep.
And the workflow that's been developed, and also understand and respect why a workflow has been developed.
Yeah.
And respect that person's kind of thinking and train of thought. So yeah, I fully agree. I think that understanding personality types is really important. And if you can understand it from a work perspective, and then you can kind of develop and bring in that personal component as well.
Yep, for sure.
What do you think is the most valuable lesson you've learned since starting Grayspace?
Things always don't go to plan. I think,
nice.
Yeah, and being able to pivot, making decisions quickly, and the return that can have. I think that's the biggest one, and not getting caught on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's probably the most important one.
Awesome.
What about you? Since starting Grayspace? Since starting Inflection?
I think being flexible.
Yeah.
As quickly as possible, making decisions as quickly as you possibly can without totally taking a huge risk.
Yep.
But being able to shape shift is important.
Yep, I agree. What do you shape shift into?
As in
like an animal.
Yeah, maybe shapeshifted. Was that like a TV show in the 90s? I feel like there was a
Beowulf or something.
No, I feel like there was like a TV show in the 90s when I was growing up that was called like Shapeshifters or something.
Maybe.
And people used to morph into like different. I don't know. Animorphs. Yes, that was it.
Wasn't there a series of books for that as well? Yeah. And the covers used to flicker.
Yes.
Anyway, bit of a tangent. I mentioned a few books in that episode.
Yes.
So I'll just give you a quick recap. The first one I mentioned was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The second one was The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Mm-hmm. They're all around psychology. And a really interesting one is Robert Greene, The Laws of Human Nature. I think they're a really good starting point. The Laws of Human Nature is like a bazillion pages. So read that one last, but the other two are really easy reads.
We can link them in the show notes.
Yep, cool.
Thanks, George. I think the one thing maybe it's worth highlighting as well is that we do have a free Techspert session coming up in March for the free community. Goes for an hour. You get access to myself, Jordan, Owen and Daniel. If you would like to come, essentially it is that roundtabling opportunity with other business owners.
Yep.
It is on the 20th of March this year. And the way that you get access to it, we'll put a link in the show notes. Just join our free community. All you have to do is sign up with your email address, and that's where we will post all of the content details. We'll post the links to access it. And if there's any kind of follow-up questions that you have, again, you get access to us. So why not come along?
Amen to that.
Thanks, George.
See you there.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.